broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. This is The Gailey Show. I am your host, JP D'Arbragosian. With me in studio is our executive producer, Jim Pounds. Hello,
hey, gang.
Jim.
How are you?
I am well. So today we have a very fun show for you. It is Friday, so we focus on culture and entertainment here on The Gailey Show. We've got 3 film reviews for you in the second half of the show. But up first, the executive director of Walking Shadow Theater Company, John Heimbuch, who is a founding member and the current artistic director, is here with us to talk about. They are Walking Shadow Theater Company. And the event that you don't know, they are a Minneapolis-based company that produces one of the most a lot of different shows, but one of the most innovative shows that I have ever seen. It was called Red Speedo. It was at the Hamlin Athletic Pool. So I'm very excited to have John with us. John is a filmmaker, a game developer, an educator, and also sings with the rock band Bad September. John, you kind of do it all. Your new seasons comes up here, starts on March 22nd. The shows include Witch, Mae West, and the Trial of Sex, and Zero Land. So without further ado, John, welcome to The Gailey Show.
Thank you, JP.
It is great to have you here.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that everyone knows Walking Shadow that should. It's one of those little bit kept secrets, and it shouldn't be a secret to anybody. So would you mind giving us a little sort of perspective and history? And
absolutely.
Let's start there.
Yeah. So Walking Shadow started in 2004 at the Minnesota Fringe Festival. We've been doing this now 20 years, if you can believe it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a collaborative effort of 3 people, myself, co-artistic director Amy Remedy, and our executive director David Pisa. And I will make clear that he is the executive director. I am merely the artistic director. He's the one who signs all the documents.
Did I say artistic director?
You did. It's all right. It's all right. But I want to credit everyone who's involved. So we've basically jumped out of the Minnesota Fringe after doing 3 shows there in 2006, and I've been doing full seasons ever since. We do a mix of original work, scripted work, immersive work, and sometimes things that border on all of those things. So original plays, original immersive site-specific productions like Red Speedo, or our puzzle plays with puzzles, of which Zero Lands is one of those, and our recently closed Cabal was also a long-running show that did that. We're at something like 50-something productions at this point. I've lost track of the exact number. But
wow,
we aim to do about 3 shows a year, but it varies. The pandemic's been throwing us a little bit. We did a bunch of online shows, and we've been moving into more site-specific work over the last few years.
I was going to say, in space is kind of all over, that you're not identified in a particular place.
We're not. No. Yeah, we tend to perform in Minneapolis, though we have produced in St. Paul. But we're very Twin Cities based. And usually our shows run about 3-4 weekends, but sometimes our shows have run many years, depending on the scope and scale of the production.
Well, in full disclosure, I had the great good fortune of being in 4 Walking Shadow shows, 2 directed by you and 2 directed by Amy. Mm-hmm. And what I always hear about Walking Shadow is they're plays often that people have not heard of, or they're not obvious or familiar. You seem to have a separate trunk or case that you take them out of that nobody else seems to know where that is. And you get them and people are like, what's that? I've never heard of it. And they're wonderful. It's consistently wonderful, surprising, happy surprise work, I guess.
Yeah, we try to perform plays that are exciting and innovative and haven't been produced in Minneapolis, whether that means that they're original or they have their premiere but just haven't been produced by any other local company. Every now and then we do one that's been done here before, but if that's the case, we try to make sure that it's very topical and very relevant, and we bring a new spin to it that feels important to the times.
Thank you. That's a great point, because without naming anybody in particular, there are times when unknown plays are unknown for a reason.
I mean, that's true.
You go and you think, I don't even know if I want to recommend that to anybody necessarily, but I cannot say that I've ever seen a Walking Shadow production that I wouldn't recommend. And back in the day when there were awards given, you often were recognized for those. There they are in the background. And I don't know if that means something, but I just think your work has such integrity. Walking Shadows work has always had so much integrity. So
Thank you, Jim.
We know you're an established player. Gosh, a lot of theaters must come and go in that 20 years, and you're still here.
It's true. We're still here. So far, so good. But, it's always touch and go, especially in these kind of weird times where we've lost a lot of venues in the Twin Cities, and audiences are still sort of figuring out what live performance is in the post-pandemic world.
What's your take on, do you think the theater audience, I mean, I know I've heard about the older theater audience has whatever apprehension or somehow their habits have changed, and that's important. Do you feel like your audience over 20 years has changed in some way? Or
well, I mean, certainly people have come and gone. I think it's been actually fairly consistent. If anything, I would say it's grown, or it started. When we started, our audience was fairly young, as we were fairly young. And I would say that our audience is baseline about 20 years older now than it was when we started.
Right.
I think there are new audience members coming in, for sure, but I do find, as I've been doing this, I think smaller companies do tend to be built around the sort of cachet of the artists involved. And I feel like that's often identified with their peers, their generation, the voices that they're speaking to. And so certainly as we've grown and as we've aged as artists, the scope and scale of the work that we do has shifted over that time, just to reflect our own values and our own priorities, and the shifting values of the world that we live in. Right. And so, yeah, I think our audiences are shifting along with us, and I think that's perfectly fine and sort of natural.
Sounds very healthy. I'm gonna draw another parallel. We have had on our podcast, This Queer Book Saved My Life, the one and only Allison Vincent, who I know has worked with you before in maybe multiple capacities.
She's worked with us pretty extensively, actually. Yeah.
Right. So I identify her with Walking Shadow and other places. Do you want to talk about that connection? Is she part of the next season, or no?
She is part of the next season. Yeah. So she came to us originally as a performer. I had worked with her many years ago in some of my collaborative work with John Ferguson, which was outside of the scope of Walking Shadows work, where I was a playwright and she was a performer, an ensemble member. And then I've just been following her work as a performer and creator for many years. We worked with her on our production of 21 Extremely Bad Breakups, which was a farcical show about breaking up, directed by Amy Rumney with an ensemble of 6 people, which included Allison Vincent.
Right.
And she was wonderful in that show. And then we worked with her on our solo performance. She performed in the play Open by Crystal Skillman, also directed by Amy, about a queer relationship and the nature of magic within that. It was a very touching, very difficult show, but she was stunning. And rose to the challenge incredibly well. And then we brought her on as director for our production of Feast, which was a companion piece written by Iowa playwright Megan Goggerty, companion piece to Beowulf, which I have been performing as an artist myself over the last few years, written by Charlie Bethel, about the return of Grendel's mother. And that was held in the banquet hall of the Black Forest. We did that 2 years in a row, last year, and the year before, 2023 and 2024. And Allison directed that performance. And now she is coming back to direct my play, my original play, Mae West and the Trial of Sex, which we'll be doing here at the Crane Theater in June 2025.
Well, let's start hearing about the upcoming season.
Let's talk about it. Well, yeah, so we have 3 shows coming up. We are doing, as you said, Witch by Jen Silverman, directed by former artistic director Amy Rumney, coming back, and also collaborating with Cody Brott as co-director, which is quite exciting.
Can I just say WITH rather than WHICH?
Yes, WITCH. Very witchy production, which is great. It was written by Jen Silverman, who is a non-binary playwright. It deals with, it's an adaptation of a Jacobean play called The Witch of Edmonton, but it's very different, and it ties really to sort of post-Trump election identity stuff. A lot of Me Too is in there. A lot of Burn the World Down is in there. A lot of what is identity and what is the obligations we have to the roles that we've been cast in as people. I think the basic way I've been talking about the show is that in this town, there's an old woman who everyone dislikes because she's an old woman. And she is really bitter and really frustrated with her life and where she is in society. And the devil shows up to her and says, I can give you anything. I can make all your wishes come true. You can have whatever power you want. You can inflict the cattle with boils. You can curse the young. You can poison the well. What is it you want to do to get your revenge on this town? And she says, is this the offer that you make the men? Because I don't think this is the offer that you make the men. I think the offer you make the men is a lot better than this. And you should come back to me when you can make me a better offer. So it's a really cool piece, and it has a lot of statements about our expectations about gender, our expectations about power, our expectations about who gets to inherit, about what roles we have. It's a very queer focused play, but it is not an openly queer play. There is a gay character in it. The devil takes many forms. It's a fun piece, but it is it's a very strong cultural commentary sort of show.
It's wonderful. Wow.
Yeah, we've had our eye on it for many years, and finally we're able to get the rights.
So that sounds like a really great way to kick off the season. We've got a break coming up right here for folks who are just turning in. Wow. We have as our guest here playwright and artistic director of Walking Shadow Theater Company, John Heimbuch. You can get tickets to all of their shows at walkingshadow.org. Their upcoming season starts with Witch, and it opens on March 22nd. And I assume we can buy tickets right now, right?
Absolutely. Please do.
Please do. We are going to come back here with John to talk about the other shows that are coming up here, particularly the one that he wrote, Mae West and the Trial of Sex. Please always follow our sponsors and shop for them, and tell them that you heard them on The Gailey Show on AM 950 Radio, because they keep progressive news on the air. See you on the flip side. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm your host, JP Darabagosian. Our guest today with us in our virtual studio is John Heimbuch, who is a founding member and artistic director of Walking Shadow Theater Company, and also the playwright of their second show that they will be debuting this season, which is Mae West and the Trial of Sex. I can't wait to hear about this one, John. Go, tell us all about it.
Sure. Okay, so Mae West is a cultural icon, a diva from the 1930s and early 40s, a famous movie star. But before she was a Hollywood actress, she had made her debut on the vaudeville and Broadway stage in the 19-teens and 1920s. She wrote a play, she was starring in a play called Sex, which was opened in 1926 and continued through 1927. It was, at the time it closed, the third longest running play on Broadway.
Really?
Yeah.
A play called Sex.
A play called Sex. Yeah. And it was, it was highly contentious. She played a sex worker who was operating in the brothels of Montreal, who fled to Trinidad, fell in love with a young heir to a Westchester family, followed him without betraying her hand to Westchester to meet his family, and discovers that she already knows his mother from her time in Montreal. And so it's a little intrigue play, a little thriller. And it was and she's completely unrepentant in the play. She never once feels bad about being a sex worker. She never once betrays her ideals as this is a line of work. She never makes a self-sacrificing move. It's very much her putting forward this sort of unburdened agenda of the low class, the sex workers, the others. And it's a fascinating play, and it was really popular, but critically panned, but adored by audiences. Anyway, she was in the middle of this play, and another play opened on Broadway called The Captive, which was about a lesbian relationship that was never seen on stage, but is very much about the main character's, Irene's, love for this woman destroying her life, completely undermining her relationships, her family, everything. It's a very toxic relationship put on stage. Well, Mae West saw this show, and she was both frustrated by its portrayal, and because of vaudeville, had known female impersonators, and decided to write her own show called The Drag, which was about a sort of male captive, they called it. It was a play about a queer relationship, queer central character, and a giant drag ball. It does have its problems, but it is also very modern in a lot of ways. It deals with a lot of psychological theory about gay identity at the time, and it has a large-scale drag ball in the third act. But it does also have a revenge story of a spurned lover who kills the main character. So it falls prey to some of the old-fashioned tropes about gay identity on stage.
Right.
I read this play as it came into the public domain last year, and decided that we as an organization couldn't stage it because it fell prey to those tropes. But it had this long-lasting impact on Broadway because their efforts to get it to Broadway failed, in part because plays were rated. The Captive was rated, Sex was rated. All of these shows were shut down for reasons of censorship, in part to keep the drag from getting to Broadway. And so Mae West went on trial and ended up doing 10 days in prison as a result of this. And of course, the whole time they're recognizing it's kind of a kangaroo court, because she's on trial for sex, but the real play that's being tried is not on the stand. It's The Drag, which they're afraid of getting to Broadway.
Right.
And so as a result of this censorship effort, a law was passed in Albany called the Wales Padlock Act, named for Senator Wales. And he was trying to get the theaters to be blocked from performing lascivious and queer content. And it basically had the penalty of any theater that was found to be guilty of doing plays that included obscenity, in scare quotes, were punished by being padlocked for up to a year afterwards. And so because of this, theater producers didn't want to stage content that pushed the boundaries, and it cracked down on all sorts of productions that happened on Broadway, meaning that basically what had been overt sexual or queer content on stage went underground again and wasn't staged in New York for a period of about 40 years until the Civil Rights Act struck that law down. So from 1927, when that law was passed, to 1965, we just basically didn't have gay representation on stage except in the most oblique ways, which is why Tennessee Williams characters are always sort of that problem son dealing with an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Or Zoo Story sort of deals with its queerness in very shaded ways. Right. It wasn't really until Boys in the Band shifted that. And so even though Sex and The Drag are not very well-known plays, they really changed the landscape of the American theater, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that.
Wow.
You know, isn't it amazing how free speech doesn't apply to queer people?
Isn't it funny?
But also, when I hear folks say things like, how can we have these bans on drag shows? Like, where is this coming from? This is a new phenomenon. And I'm like, well,
really
actually,
not.
If you know the pre-code Hollywood and all of that stuff, and now hearing what you're talking about in the theater, they're leaning back in on very well established, abuses of power
Absolutely.
to limit, free speech. And the only free speech that should be allowed, quote unquote, according to them, as we've seen with Facebook this week, is being able to call LGBTQ people mentally ill.
Yeah,
which is absolutely bonkers. I am so excited though that you have had the opportunity to bring this, because as you're talking about it, I'm like, I didn't know any of this. I just
no,
knew
it's
about
very
Mae West
hidden.
as a famous actress. So to know all of this background and this play that she was writing is just absolutely fantastic. And thank you for making a play about that. Where is it
I'm excited
to be performed? Is it
that will be opening at the that's at the Crane Theater. It opens at the very end of May, like the last day of May, and runs through most of June, but not into Pride weekend. So that will be really fun.
A great play for Pride Month.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a company of 6 actors. Allison Vincent's directing, and I'm very excited for it.
Congratulations, John. It is so great to have you here. You are an official friend of the show. So whenever you've got new work coming out, or you just want to talk about theater in general and queer representation in it, please.
Always happy to.
We will welcome you back with open arms here on the show. John Heimbuch, artistic director of the Walking Shadow Theater Company. You can get your tickets. Don't wait. Get them now. walkingshadow.org. When we come back, we will have 3 movie reviews for you, some Golden Globe winners and one that should have been. See you on the flip side of this break. And you are back with us here at The Gailey Show. I'm JP Derpagosian. Still in the studio with me is Jim Pounds, our executive producer. Something that we want to do here on the show as film buffs, Jim and I, and we're constantly reviewing, or watching rather, LGBTQ films, and when we're researching them, finding that there are very few reviews of these films. And so we want to rectify that as much as we can here on The Gailey Show. And so today, we've got 3 films. Interestingly, 2 of them are actually very well known and have received Golden Globe Awards at last week's Golden Globe ceremony, one of which should have been nominated and wasn't. So why don't we start with one of the big winners from the Golden Globes. We will only do films that have a queer either twist or element to them, or are made by queer filmmakers. I don't know if that should be said without goes without saying, rather, but here we are. So the first film that we're going to be talking about is Conclave. Conclave we saw in theaters at the beautiful Main Theater in Northeast. What this film is about is the Pope has died, heart attack. And now I think they're called the College of Cardinals, have come together, and under the Dean Thomas Lawrence, actually, it's the Cardinal Dean. The person's name isn't Dean. And the Cardinal Dean, who is Thomas Lawrence, is gathering together to elect the successor Pope. So he is managing all of that, and he is played by Ralph Fiennes. The 4 main candidates to become the Pope are Aldo Bellini of the United States, who is a liberal, and I guess we would say liberal for the Catholic Church, not a liberal in how you and I would consider that to be. And that's also where the previous Pope who had died had been as well. He was also a liberal. Then there's Joshua Adeyemi from Nigeria, who is a social conservative, but would be the first African Pope. There is Joseph Tremblay from Canada, who is a moderate. And then Goffredo Tedesco of Italy, who is a very staunch traditionalist and, as you go along there, very anti-immigrant. And what we would probably characterize as a far-right candidate to be Pope. Now, there is a queer twist to this film. And so if you don't want to hear what that is, then now would be the time. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but now would be the time to stop listening to The Gailey Show and come back in about 7 or 8 minutes. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, or you are streaming this, just fast forward 7 or 8 minutes here so we get into our next movie. But I think for me, I'll start, Jim, if that's all right. Ralph Fiennes never been better. Really on form here. I understand why he is being, feted and in the lead to win the Oscar for Best Actor. He's just really fantastic in this role. Very nuanced, very able to convey internal angst in the sense of what do I do? He's trying to manage this process and make it seem above board. He's trying to navigate these four very intense candidates, some who are groundbreaking, some who are playing some shenanigans here. It's really interesting to me how, as you're going along in the film, that it seems more that the external politics to the Catholic Church are determining who's going to get elected pope, as opposed to the other way around of who is maybe the most faithful person, who is the most well-versed in the lore and in the interpretation of Catholicism is now rising up to be pope, and then will help guide the church in navigating external things. So it was very, interesting in that regard as we're watching each of these candidates be ruled for or against in the voting process. There are things that I didn't know about, so the film does, I think, very well. I hope they're doing a very good job of illuminating what that process is like. I have to take it as a grain of salt, I guess, that the process that they show us is what actually happens during the voting procedure. Isabel Rossellini has a very interesting role as a nun. And what she's involved in is that there is politics happening within the film to knock out other candidates. And so we start to see this playing out of all of these, bringing people in that maybe shouldn't be part of the process, that are there to deliberately shine light on past and indiscretions on one of the four leading candidates. There's also a subplot as to what was, I don't know if it was necessarily foul play, that was it a murder of the Pope, but there's clearly something happening with one of the candidates of should he even be a cardinal anymore? Was he fired by the Pope? And why is he still here? And is he covering that up and is now trying to become the Pope to cover up any crimes maybe that he has committed? And then there is the queer storyline, a twist. And maybe I'll hold off of that right now. And Jim, why don't you give your thoughts on Conclave?
Well, I'll just do this really quick. It feels like a big studio movie. It's not. It's focus features. I loved Rafe. I loved Isabella. I loved Stanley Tucci. I loved Carlos. Those are the four actors that I thought distinguished themselves. And I would, if we're going to do a grading system, is that what we're doing? I would probably give this 3 out of 4 stars, or 4 out of 5 stars, maybe. I like these big old studio movies with big lush costumes and gorgeous sets and beautiful cinematography. And, that's the kind of thing that I go to see on a big movie screen. But it also had intrigue and personal politics and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it. It didn't change my life, but it was a nice way to spend 2 hours.
The score is very lush strings, very dramatic strings, really sets the tone right away that this is going to be a terse film. Very excellent score to set the tone and kind of push you along emotionally speaking. The queer element to it is that there is a priest that folks didn't know was a priest, was a secretly assigned to Afghanistan. Folks didn't know that. And he shows up. He is a level of cardinal, I guess, or a priest or a cardinal that is able to vote on who the next pope will be. And so he shows up to the proceedings and folks don't know who he is. And he presents the correct paperwork. And so they admit him and allow him to be part of the voting process. The twist is that this cardinal had gone to Switzerland for potential gender reassignment surgery. And I think what's happening here is that the candidate, the cardinal, is intersex or may have biological organs that would make this person to be considered to be biologically female. They never really quite go into what it is. All we know is that the cardinal had gone to Switzerland, that the Pope had known about it, and that this, this individual may not be biologically male. This comes at the very end of the movie, and that's what I didn't like about it, and why I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 stars, is that this could have been a really interesting meditation on gender and gender identity, and how that plays out in a very male-dominated, structurally sexist organization that is the Catholic Church. I know a lot of Catholics, bristle when I say that it is a sexist organization, because they're talking about this is the way it's always been, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there has been, if you adhere to this history, a female pope who presented as male for their tenure as pope. That tends to get downplayed as history, but we missed it here because they wanted to sensationalize it. They wanted to make it a big reveal at the end of the movie, and so this person is ultimately selected to be pope, and they kind of hold back and go, maybe I can't be pope, and they wait for Cardinal Thomas Lawrence, who's played by Ralph Fiennes, to kind of come in, and Rafe sort of gives his blessing, I guess you could say. Was that what happened, you think, Jim? Is that he gave his blessing for this cardinal to accept the papacy? And I just feel like it comes at the end when we could have had a very interesting exploration of that within the Catholic Church, within their dogma, and we didn't get that. It was sort of played for theatricality. And that's why I'm going to give it that 3 out of 5 stars here, because they really missed an opportunity to talk about something in a way that had never been talked about, at least on film before, at least in a major studio film. And I consider Focus Features to be a major studio. We've never really seen that before. And so that could have been it's based off of a novel. So maybe the novel goes into it on a much more deeper basis, but the film did not, which I think was a big miss for it. So 3 out of 5 stars for me.
Yeah, I think it's a movie that I go to the movies for, and so I like that. But the next film we're going to talk about is what you usually see when you think gay film, whatever that means to you. What it conjures up for me is probably 3 actors in a scene, and there's only 5 people on the crew, and they're all crammed into a living room with 2 flashlights and a candle. And that's what High Tide felt like to me. It's a Portuguese film, or it's in Portuguese. It's actually a Brazilian film, and it's it has that small craft made from cutting out pieces of paper and very small, crafty sort of sensibility about it. And what it had going for it in my mind, and you can tell the story, I know that you want to set that up, but was its sort of mood and atmosphere. And you go from a 5,000 foot level view of the Pope and Catholicism and all that down into somebody's individual life in an individual home. And the scale is very, very small. It's 10 feet off the ground, not 5,000 feet off the ground.
Well, so it takes place in Provincetown, and it's actually in English.
Oh, I thought, but it's a Brazilian
film. But the main character, Lorenzo is Brazilian. Okay. And so he talks with his family back in, particularly his mother back in Brazil, in Portuguese. But it takes place in Provincetown, and it is in English. And our main character is working in Provincetown as an undocumented worker. And so the summer season is coming to an end, and he is trying to figure out how he's going to stay in the country. And he can only do that if he finds work from an employer who will sponsor him. And he has not been able to find that employer in Provincetown. And so he has to do these weird odds and ends jobs, even though his formal training is in accounting. So we're following him, and he's also navigating the breakup of a long-term relationship. And it sounds like it was a hard breakup, and then he was basically ghosted. And whenever he tries to call, the ex never answers the phone, and he is staying in a guest house of a resident of Provincetown, a longtime resident. And so you really kind of get to see Provincetown in a way that you normally don't get to see. You normally, when it's represented on film, you see it, for the beaches and the parties and the romantic drama and that regard. And here you really get to see the beauty of Provincetown still, Right. And that to me was kind of interesting to see this really heartbreaking drama of, our main character trying to navigate staying in here. And I was relating to that not only on a, uh, coming to America and wanting to have the economic opportunities of being in America, but also as a queer person wanting to come to America and being in P-Town and trying to figure out, how do I stay here? How do I have a life here? And as the summer comes to an end, he meets Maurice on the beach one day. And also, there's some beautiful scenes just at the beach, and I'm like, I have to go to P-Town just to experience these beaches because I've never been there. And so, as you're watching it, you're gonna want to go like grab your swim trunks and just run over to P-Town immediately to enjoy that water. But there he meets Maurice, and these two are starting to get to know each other. They are maybe potentially romantically into each other. They do, begin to pursue that, even though Maurice is there for basically a week. Because, and this is why this film is going to get, I'm only going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. We fall into this trope of films where the gay, one of the romantic interests is leaving abroad, and Maurice is going to be leaving to Africa. And it's, that's the conflict is Lorenzo going to stay with Maurice? How can he do that? Because, Maurice is going to be going to Africa. And so that's the reason why that trope, that kind of storyline, we don't need that, necessarily in these films. But otherwise, beautifully acted, gorgeous cinematography, and Academy Award winner Marissa Tomei in it as well. So it is available on Prime, High Tide. Check it out. We will be back to talk about Emilia Perez. To the Gailey Show. I'm JP Dervagosian. We are reviewing films this Friday afternoon for you. We reviewed Conclave and High Tide. High Tide, you can go and watch tonight. Available on Prime. You can rent it there, and I recommend it. I would watch it again this weekend. It was that good. The last film that we're going to talk about today was the big winner at the Golden Globes last Sunday, which is Emilia Perez. And this film is about a Mexican cartel leader who enlists a lawyer to help them disappear and achieve their dream of transitioning into a woman. So they are abandoning the cartel. They're asking Zoe to get the family out of Mexico and into Switzerland, where they will be safe. And then they're also asking Zoe Saldana, their lawyer, to find a doctor for them, a surgeon who will provide them with these surgeries that they need to transition into a woman. And so we see that process in the beginning. And then the second half is where the former, now Mexican cartel leader, she comes back and finds Zoe Saldana to bring her kids back to Mexico and try to reunite the family as much as they can reunite the family. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of drama, both the before and the after medical transition. Jim, maybe we want to start with you about your thoughts.
Well, I guess there's some controversy about the film that I've just become aware of recently, but I was all proud of the fact that here was a film with a trans lead. I thought, that's fantastic. That's great, visibility, and it just was nice to see that. I was proud of that as an LGBT person. But, it's always hard to be entirely authentic and to not cross lines, and who knows what all the motives were. And so I enjoyed the film when I saw it, sort of apart from the criticism of it. I thought it was... I thought the cast was great. I thought the story was melodramatic, but satisfyingly so. And it's a kind of it's in a musical format too. And so it's very, I don't know if operatic is the right word, but it seemed at that scale. And I thought everybody seemed they all seemed like they were in the same movie. And sometimes that's a problem. And everybody seemed to be on the same page. And I thought it was very compelling. And I enjoyed it. Now I'm reading the criticism about it and feeling like maybe I was too enthusiastic. But when I saw it, I said, I don't know that we're going to see a better film than that this year. Those were my words immediately after seeing it. Now maybe over time that's tempered a little bit.
So Carla Sofia Gascon is the lead, and she's absolutely fantastic in this. She carries the entire film. If you hadn't cast an actress of her caliber, the film would have flopped immediately. So she is absolutely phenomenal in this role. Zoe Saldana, also very good. I've never seen her do anything like this. She learned to rap for this film. It is a musical, and really it kind of follows her storyline for a lot of it. So I think that there could be, some argument there of who is the lead actress in the movie. But Zoe does some really fantastic work here. Very intense, but also some vulnerability in the performance, the nuances of it, where I could absolutely see her going on to winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Her Golden Globe speech was a bit much. That I hope on the awards circuit that she's able to, I think the emotion of the moment really overwhelmed her, and you could really see that, which was, really heartwarming to see. And at the same time, you were like, okay, let's wrap this up. But it is a French production, and this is where it's been getting a lot of pushback, is that apparently the director said that he didn't need to do any research into Mexico. And viewers in Mexico were saying, yeah, and it shows that you didn't do any research into the film. And there have also been some criticisms on the representation of the transition, and was it, sensationalized? And I think these are valid criticisms. I think that if you're of a different cultural community and you're going to do a film that is exclusively about another one, and you don't do the research, and then you're kind of a jerk about it and saying, well, I don't need to do the research, I think that's problematic. I think that is problematic. And I think that it is very difficult because there's so much misinformation and disinformation and just outright lies about what goes into transition and gender affirmation and all of the different levels about that. It is not just about surgery. There are a variety of different ways that people choose to transition. And a lot of times surgery isn't one of them. Frankly, there are a lot of trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary folks who never do any type of surgery. So I think that could have been handled better by the filmmakers, but I think that Carla Sofia Gascon is absolutely, again, the film would not have worked without her. And she does, bring a level of gravitas, of sophistication, of heartbreak and nuance to the film that just for her performance, I would recommend seeing it. And it is available on Netflix. You can watch it right after this broadcast. But I would be rooting for her to win the Oscar, just because no trans woman has ever won Best Actress Oscar. And so for that regard, I would absolutely be supporting her candidacy. Those are our 3 films for today. We will continue to be providing films, a lot of them that have already come out, but we want to provide those reviews for them, even though they've been out for a while, even years in some instances, because if you're looking for a new film, there are a lot of different platforms which you can see them, including Prime and Deku and other platforms. Tubi has been an amazing resource. So we'll be doing that just so that, you can have a sense of what to expect when you watch these movies. But that is our show for today. That is the end of our first week of this daily version of the Gailey Show. We will see you. You can watch best of clips and roundup of what we've done tomorrow, Saturday, this past week, at 2 p.m. And we will see you back here live on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.